The first punch didn't hurt. What hurt was the look on her face when it landed, the pure, deliberate hatred in my sister's eyes. "You think you're better than me, Clara," she hissed. "You think you deserve everything." The next strike knocked me backward against the counter. My vision blurred. The smell of garlic and bleach filled the kitchen, and somewhere in that mess a glass shattered. I could taste metal. I remember thinking how quiet the world felt for a moment, right before the storm inside her broke loose. Melissa's voice rose to a scream. "Mom said you'd give me the house you owe me." The words echoed through the narrow hallway of our mother's old home, the one our father built before he died. That house had always been our family's pride, but tonight it felt like a trap. I stumbled toward the door, dizzy, holding my side, trying to speak. "Melissa, stop!" I gasped. "We can talk." But she was already on me again, grabbing my hair, dragging me back toward the sink. Her ring caught my skin. I felt the warm slide of blood down my cheek. My body hit the tile hard, and the air rushed from my lungs. For a second, I thought she'd stop. I thought she'd see me lying there shaking terrified and remember that I was her sister. But her face twisted into something else, something that didn't belong to the person I grew up with. "Sign the papers, Clara," she demanded, her voice shaking with rage. "You think you can control everything, but you're just like her. You're nothing without me." My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I tried to crawl, but my foot slipped on the blood that had pooled beneath me. I could hear our mother's footsteps in the hall, slow and deliberate. Relief hit me like oxygen. She'd stop this. She'd stop her. "Mom!" I choked out. "Help me!" Margaret appeared in the doorway, her floral nightgown soft against the light. For a split second, I saw her the way I used to, as the woman who kissed bruises better and sang lullabies through storms. But her eyes were cold, assessing, calculating. "Melissa," she said quietly enough. My sister froze, chest heaving. I waited for Mom to come to me. She didn't move. "Look at what you've done," she said to me. Her tone was filled with disgust. "You always provoke her, Clara. You always make her angry." The floor tilted beneath me. The betrayal was worse than the pain. I tried to speak, but my words came out as a dry whisper. "She's hurting me." Mom stepped closer, kneeling not to help, but to press a trembling hand to my mouth. "Stop talking," she hissed. "You'll ruin everything." "Do you want the neighbors to hear?" Melissa dropped to her knees beside her, crying, now shaking, pretending remorse. "I didn't mean to," she said, smearing my blood with her hands like a child caught red-handed. She wouldn't listen. Mom's eyes softened, not at me, but at her. "It's all right," she murmured. "Go get some towels." I wanted to scream, but my voice was gone. I felt the world narrowing, the sound of the rain outside, muffled by the walls, the flicker of the broken kitchen light, the taste of iron. I thought I heard Mom dialing 911. Hope flickered for a second. Then her voice came calm and careful. "Yes, my daughter fell. She fainted and hit her head. No need for an ambulance. It's not that bad." The phone clicked. The room spun. I remember the faint sound of sirens in the distance, maybe from another street, maybe not at all. The last thing I saw before the darkness closed in was the reflection of my mother's face in the window, expressionless, her hand on my sister's shoulder as if she were consoling the real victim. And then everything went silent. When I opened my eyes, the world was too white. The ceiling above me buzzed faintly, a fluorescent hum that made my head throb. My throat felt dry, every breath scraping against sandpaper. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. Then the beeping registered a heart monitor, steady but fragile, like it was reminding me I was still here. A nurse in blue scrubs leaned over me, her face kind but sharp with concern. "Clara, can you hear me?" she asked softly. My name sounded strange in her voice, like it belonged to someone else. I tried to nod, but pain seared through my ribs, and a low moan escaped me instead. "Don't move too fast," she said gently. "You're safe now." Safe. The word almost made me laugh. It didn't belong to me. I was never safe. Not in that house. Not in that family. When I turned my head slightly, I saw her. My mother sitting at the foot of the bed, hands folded neatly in her lap, face pale and solemn, the perfect picture of maternal worry. But I knew that look. It wasn't grief. It was performance. The nurse checked the machines, writing something on a chart. Then her eyes flicked to me again. "Can you tell me what happened?" she asked. My lips parted, the words rising like they wanted to break free, but my mother's hand moved before I could speak. She rested it over my wrist, firm but gentle, her thumb tracing a slow warning. "She fainted," Mom said smoothly. "My daughter's been under stress lately." The nurse's expression didn't change, but I saw the flicker of doubt in her eyes. "Ma'am, I'd prefer to hear from her directly." My mother smiled faintly. "Of course, she'll tell you the same." Her nails dug in just enough to sting, just enough to remind me who still held power. My heart monitor betrayed me, beeping faster. The nurse leaned closer to me, voice lower now, meant only for me. "Clara, did someone hurt you?" The room seemed to shrink. The air grew thick. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to tell her everything, the kitchen, the blood, the way my mother had watched, but Mom's hand tightened. I could feel her pulse racing under her skin, not from fear for me, but fear of what I might say. I swallowed hard, eyes stinging. "No," I rasped. "It was an accident." The nurse stared for a long moment. She didn't believe me. I could see it in the way her shoulders tensed, the way her pen paused above the clipboard. "All right," she said finally. "You're 18, so it's your call. But if you ever feel unsafe, you can come here any time." She gave me a small card, slipping it discreetly into my hand. "There's a number on the back, day or night." I closed my fingers around it like it was the last solid thing in a world built on lies. When she left, my mother exhaled the mask, cracking just enough for her voice to slip out cold. "You need to be careful," she whispered. "You could destroy everything your father built." My throat ached. "Everything he built," I whispered. "You mean the fear." She didn't answer. She just stood, smoothed her blouse, and pressed the nurse call button. "She'll need discharge papers," she told them when they arrived. "We'll take her home." The nurse hesitated, glancing at me, but I nodded weakly. It was easier than fighting. When they unhooked the IV and handed Mom the forms, I caught sight of my reflection in the monitor's black screen, pale, swollen eyes haunted. I didn't look like a woman. I looked like evidence. Mom guided me out of the hospital like a child, her arm around me for show, whispering through clenched teeth, "Smile if anyone's watching." Outside, the cold air hit my face, sharp and real. I looked at the card still in my hand and thought for the first time maybe the truth didn't have to stay buried. Maybe silence wasn't the only way to survive. The car ride home was quiet in the way a tomb is quiet, full of things buried but never gone. The streetlights flickered over my bandaged hands, turning the bruises on my wrists into shadows that seemed to pulse with every heartbeat. Mom drove with both hands tight on the wheel, her eyes fixed straight ahead, expression unreadable. Melissa sat in the back seat, her reflection in the window pale and distant. I could feel her staring at me, and when our eyes met in the mirror, she smiled. It was small, but I saw it the same cruel twist she'd worn before she hit me. "You're lucky," she said softly, just loud enough for me to hear. I could have gone harder. Mom didn't react. She didn't tell her to stop. She just turned the radio up, drowning the tension in an old country song. The familiar melody made my stomach twist. It was one of Dad's favorites. He used to hum it while fixing the porch railing or shelling peas in the kitchen. Back when our house still had laughter in it before his death, left us fractured and mean. When we pulled into the driveway, the porch light was off, the windows dark. I hesitated before stepping out. The gravel crunched beneath my shoes, the sound echoing through the cold night. My chest tightened. The house loomed like a sleeping animal, quiet but dangerous when disturbed. Mom's voice sliced through the silence. "Go inside, Clara." I obeyed. It was easier that way. Inside, the air smelled faintly of bleach and candle wax, like someone had tried to erase the night. There were no traces of blood, no broken glass, no evidence. Even the rug had been replaced. Melissa walked past me with a smirk, brushing my shoulder. "You should rest," she said. "You look awful." Her perfume was sweet and cloying. I wanted to slap it out of the air. You almost killed me, I whispered. Her smile didn't fade. You should have signed the deed then. She disappeared down the hallway, humming. I stood frozen in the living room, staring at the family photos on the wall. There we were. Me, Melissa, Mom, and Dad. In one, I was 6 missing a tooth, grinning beside my sister as Dad lifted us both on his shoulders. I remembered that day, the smell of cut grass, the warmth of the sun, Mom laughing behind the camera. It was a different lifetime. That family no longer existed. I walked to the kitchen, my feet moving slowly across the spotless tile. The bleach stung my nose. The same spot where Melissa had slammed me against the counter gleamed under the light. I traced the edge of the sink with trembling fingers, as if touching it could confirm what had really happened. "It's better this way," Mom said from behind me. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. "Families survive by staying quiet." I turned, heart pounding. "Quiet?" I asked. "You watched her do it." "She lost control," Mom said simply. "You know how your sister is. She didn't mean it." My laugh was small broken. "Didn't mean to make me bleed?" "Lower your voice." She stepped closer, her eyes sharp. "You think airing our business will help?" "You'll just embarrass yourself. People don't forgive families that fall apart. They pity them." "You're afraid of pity," I whispered. "I'm afraid of losing what's left," she snapped. Then softer, "We've already lost too much." I stared at her for a long time. For the first time, I realized she wasn't protecting Melissa. She was protecting herself, her image, her comfort, her illusion of control. "You can't bury this," I said finally. She smiled sadly. "Watch me." She turned off the kitchen light and walked away, leaving me in darkness that smelled like disinfectant and denial. Upstairs, I could hear Melissa's laughter muffled by walls that had learned to keep secrets. I pressed the nurse's card in my pocket, feeling its edges bite into my palm. If silence was survival, I was done surviving. I wanted to live. Sleep didn't come. It never did after violence. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the faint hum of the heater sounding like a heartbeat in the walls. Every creak of the floorboards made my stomach tighten. I could hear Melissa's door opening and closing down the hall, her footsteps light but deliberate. I waited for her to burst in again to finish what she'd started. But she didn't. She didn't have to. The fear did her work for her. I turned on my side, my ribs aching, and my eyes landed on the small jewelry box Dad gave me when I turned 16. Inside, beneath a tangle of necklaces, was an old photo Dad on the porch, smiling arms slung around Mom's shoulders. Melissa and I were sitting on the steps barefoot laughing. The camera had caught us mid-motion, hair wild, eyes bright. I used to think that photo meant we were happy. Now it felt like a lie printed in color. Dad's death had been the beginning of everything breaking. The doctors called it a heart attack, but Mom said it was disappointment that killed him. He worked too hard for ungrateful children, she'd told me at the funeral. I was 20 then, home from college for the first time in months. Melissa was still living with them, still in that small world of obedience and resentment. When I moved back after Dad's passing, I thought I was helping Mom rebuild. I didn't know I was stepping back into a prison, only this time the bars were invisible. Morning light finally crept through the curtains, cold and gray. I dragged myself out of bed, every movement heavy. Downstairs, the smell of coffee filled the air. Mom was at the table reading the newspaper like nothing had happened. Melissa stood by the counter, scrolling through her phone bruises, faintly visible on her knuckles. I froze in the doorway. "Good morning," Mom said evenly, without looking up. "You should eat. You have a doctor's appointment at 10. Her voice was so calm, so normal, I almost believed her. I almost believed I'd imagined everything. That's how she worked, turning brutality into misunderstanding, turning screams into silence. Gaslighting was her art form. Melissa smirked without looking up. "You should be grateful, Clara. Mom cleaned up your mess all night." My hands trembled. "My mess," I said quietly. "You nearly killed me." Mom's eyes flicked up sharp as a blade. "Enough, both of you." I laughed bitterly. "You can't just erase it." "I'm not erasing anything," she said, standing slowly. "I'm preserving what's left." "Do you want the neighbors to think we're monsters?" "We are," I said before I could stop myself. Her hand came fast open, clean practiced. The slap wasn't hard enough to knock me down, but it was hard enough to silence me. Melissa laughed softly. "See, Mom's right. You never learn." I felt something shift inside me, not rage, not even sadness. Just clarity. I looked at both of them, the mother who had replaced love with appearances, the sister who had replaced insecurity with violence, and realized they needed me broken. My pain kept them balanced. My silence kept their world stable. Without it, they'd have to face what they'd become. "You can keep pretending," I whispered, "but I'm done." I turned and walked out before either could respond. The cold morning air hit my face, stinging but clean. The nurse's card burned in my pocket, a reminder that not everyone lived in denial. Across the street, Evelyn from next door was tending her garden, trimming the dead heads from her roses. When she saw me, she smiled gently the way she always did. "Rough night?" she asked. I hesitated, then nodded. "You could say that." "Come by later," she said. "I baked too much bread again." It was a small kindness, but it pierced something deep in me. In a house full of lies, her warmth felt dangerous. And for the first time, I realized danger wasn't always what hurt you. It was also what made you see what you'd been missing. That afternoon, I stood at the kitchen sink, washing the same mug over and over, just to keep my hands busy. The bruise on my cheek had turned a deep violet, darkening every time the water hit my reflection in the window. Melissa's laughter echoed from upstairs, sharp, cruel, carefree. I tried not to listen. I tried not to feel. But silence was a living thing in this house, one that crawled beneath the skin and whispered that escape was impossible. Then a soft knock at the back door. I turned. Evelyn stood there holding a loaf of bread wrapped in a towel. "You look like you haven't eaten," she said, stepping inside without waiting for permission. She placed the loaf on the counter and looked at me in that way she always did, seeing more than I wanted her to. "Rough couple of days," I tried to smile. "Just family stuff." "Family stuff doesn't leave bruises, Clara." Her voice was quiet but steady. I froze my hand, still in the sink. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper. "I used to be a nurse," she said. "You know that, right?" I nodded. "I've seen things people trying to hide what's killing them. You can't heal what you pretend doesn't exist." She placed the note on the counter. "That's the number for a counselor who works with domestic abuse survivors. And if you ever need help, real help, knock on my door 3 times. "I'll know." She left before I could respond. I stared at the note for a long time, her handwriting looping and careful, the kind you only see from people who mean what they write. That night, I hid my old phone behind the books on my nightstand. It still worked if I plugged it in, even though the screen was cracked. I downloaded a recording app, hands trembling as I tested it. The soft click of the button sounded louder than thunder. For the next few days, I became a ghost in my own home. I moved quietly, waited, watched. I started to notice patterns, how Melissa's temper rose whenever Mom mentioned bills, how Mom defended her before she even finished speaking, how their alliance depended on keeping me silent. They needed me to be the problem, so I became invisible. I cleaned, cooked, nodded, obeyed, and I recorded. Every argument, every insult, every threat whispered in the hallway after midnight. I recorded Mom's voice saying, "Don't you dare tell anyone, Clara. We'll lose everything." I recorded Melissa snarling, "If you talk, I'll make sure you regret it." It became my secret rhythm, fear and defiance dancing together. Each clip was a heartbeat of truth stored safely in the cloud, sent to an email address I made at the school where I used to teach. Clara Weston, the account name read for future reference. The irony wasn't lost on me. One evening, while Mom and Melissa were watching TV, I slipped outside to the porch. The air smelled like rain again. I scrolled through the recordings, each one a small rebellion, and hit play on the first. Melissa's voice filled the night, vicious and real. "You think you're better than me?" she screamed through the tinny speaker. "I'll show you what happens when you cross me." The sound of my own cry followed, sharp and breaking. I felt sick listening to it, but I couldn't stop. It wasn't just evidence. It was proof that I wasn't crazy. I wasn't making it up. The next day, Melissa noticed the way I avoided her eyes. She smirked. "You look different," she said. "You hiding something?" I forced a laugh. "Just tired." She leaned close enough for me to smell her perfume. Good. Stay that way. But as she walked away, I whispered under my breath, not for long. That night, I slipped my phone beneath my pillow, the red recording light glowing faintly in the dark. For the first time in years, I didn't pray for peace. I prayed for proof. It happened 3 nights later. The air was thick with thunder rain clawing against the windows as if the sky itself was warning me to stop. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. I sat on my bed with the old phone open, listening to another recording. Melissa's voice crackled through the tiny speaker filled with venom. You think Mom loves you? She pities you. You're a burden, Clara. You've always been. I closed my eyes, breathing slowly. The words didn't hurt anymore. They were evidence, now frozen pieces of her cruelty I could finally hold. I was careful, so careful, checking that the files uploaded to the cloud after every recording. I had backups of everything. But monsters have instincts, and that night hers found me. I was half asleep when I heard the door creak open. The floor groaned beneath her weight, and before I could hide the phone, Melissa's hand shot out and grabbed it from my lap. "What's this?" she snapped. I froze. Nothing. Her eyes flicked to the screen, the red icon glowing like a siren. She pressed play. My own voice filled the room. "Please stop, Melissa. You're hurting me." Then the sound of her screaming, the slap, the crash. Her face drained of color, then twisted into something feral. "You recorded me," she hissed. "You're spying on your own family. I had to," I said, backing away. "No one believes me." She lunged, yanking the charger cord so hard it snapped. "You want to make me the villain?" she shouted, her voice rising to a shriek. "You want to ruin me." I stumbled toward the door, but she shoved me against the wall. Pain exploded down my side. "Melissa, stop!" I gasped. "You're insane!" "Say it again," she snarled, raising the phone like a weapon. "Say it again." Mom's footsteps thundered down the hall. "What's going on?" she demanded, storming into the room. Her eyes went straight to the shattered phone on the floor, then to me. "What did you do now, Clara?" The words hit harder than Melissa's fists. "She found my phone," I whispered. "I recorded her attacking me." "You recorded?" Your sister Mom's voice dropped, horrified. Not at the violence, but at the exposure. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Melissa was crying now, shaking, clutching her arm as if I had hurt her. "She hates me, Mom," she sobbed. "She's trying to ruin us." "That's not true," I shouted, but my voice broke under theirs. Mom turned on me like a blade. "Get out," she said. "You're not welcome in this room." "Mom, enough!" she screamed, her face twisting in rage. "You've always been jealous of your sister, always trying to make yourself the victim." I took a step back. The walls felt smaller, the air heavier. "You saw what she did to me," I whispered. "You know." Her answer was a whisper colder than the storm outside. "You bring shame to this family." Then Melissa moved. She hit me, a blur of motion, knocking me to the floor. My head cracked against the dresser. The world tilted. I heard Mom shouting, but her voice came from far away. Melissa's fists rained down, each one faster, angrier, until I stopped fighting. Until I couldn't. Somewhere downstairs, a voice cut through the chaos, Evelyn's. "Margaret, what's happening up there?" I heard the front door burst open, the sharp tone of a phone on speaker. 911. Evelyn said, her voice shaking. "I need help. It's the Weston house. They're screaming someone's being hurt." Mom froze. Melissa backed away, chest heaving, eyes wild. "You stupid old woman," Mom hissed toward the door. "It's fine. Mind your business." But Evelyn's voice was calm and steady. "They're already on their way." For a heartbeat, the house was silent except for the storm outside. Mom looked at me, bleeding, trembling on the floor, and whispered, "You'll regret this." Then she walked to the window and pulled the curtains closed, as if the darkness could still hide what we had become. The sound of sirens grew louder, cutting through the thunder. Melissa sank to the floor, sobbing, her hands slick with my blood. I wanted to tell her I hated her, but I didn't. I just whispered the truth. "It's over." And for the first time, I believed it might be. The world was all noise at first, sirens, footsteps, rain pounding the roof in a wild rhythm that blurred with my pulse. I could hear Evelyn shouting downstairs, her voice sharp with panic, the creak of the front door as officers entered. But everything sounded far away, like I was underwater. My vision dimmed at the edges, narrowing until all I could see was the pattern on the rug beneath me, a swirl of blue and gray that looked almost peaceful. I remember thinking, so this is what silence really feels like. Melissa's sobs faded into whispers. She made me do it, she said, her voice quivering, performing remorse before the police even entered. She kept pushing me. I wanted to scream, but my mouth wouldn't open. My head throbbed where it had struck the dresser, blood sticky in my hair. I could taste copper, bitter, and metallic. The light flickered above me, humming like a dying bee. Through the blur, I saw Mom pacing, wringing her hands. It was an accident, she kept repeating, her voice brittle, rehearsed. My daughters were fighting, that's all. A male voice, steady, calm, answered. Ma'am, please step aside. Then a flashlight beam cut through the dimness, landing on me. Boots shuffled closer, a pair of gloved hands pressed against my neck, checking for a pulse. She's breathing, but she's in shock. Someone said, Get a gurney. I tried to open my eyes fully to focus, but the ceiling twisted and spun. I saw Mom's face hovering above mine, her expression tightening as she noticed the police camera recording everything. She leaned close enough for me to smell her perfume, lavender and lies. Don't say a word, Clara, she whispered. Do you hear me? Not one word. My throat moved, but no sound came out. They lifted me onto the stretcher, the straps cold against my skin. As they carried me through the living room, I caught a glimpse of the wall where the family portraits had hung. They were gone. Mom had taken them down before the police arrived, leaving faint rectangles of lighter paint where memories used to be. Outside, the storm had broken into a steady drizzle. Red and blue lights flashed across the wet pavement, painting everything in sickening colors. Evelyn stood by her porch, clutching her robe, eyes wide with shock. When our gazes met, something passed between us. Relief, guilt, and a silent promise that this time someone had seen. We've got her, one of the EMTs said as they loaded me into the ambulance. BP's low possible concussion. Let's move. The doors closed, shutting out the chaos. For the first time in years, I was leaving that house not by choice, but alive. In the blur of lights and pain, I heard one last thing before the siren drowned everything out. Mom's voice, faint but clear. She'll destroy us, she said to the officer. She's always been unstable. Even half-conscious, I felt the sting of those words. She wasn't defending me. She was preparing her story. The paramedic beside me checked my pupils, his tone calm but urgent. Stay with me, ma'am. Can you tell me your name? My lips trembled. Clara. I managed to whisper. Good. You're going to be all right, Clara. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that leaving that house meant the end of it. But I knew my mother. She would spin her tail, call every favor, every friend, make me the villain again. As the ambulance sped away, I turned my head toward the small window. The house shrank in the distance, dark against the flashing sky. For a moment, I thought I saw Melissa on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, her face streaked with tears. Maybe she finally realized what she'd done. Maybe she didn't. My vision blurred again, but before I blacked out completely, I saw Evelyn talking to the police, her hands gesturing toward the upstairs window. She had heard everything. She had seen enough. The edges of my world faded to gray. The last sound I heard was the paramedic saying, she's going to make it. But the truth was, part of me didn't want to. Not yet. Not until someone finally said it out loud, what they did, what they were. Only then could I wake up and keep breathing. Only then could I start again. When I woke again, the room was brighter than I remembered, the air filled with the sterile scent of antiseptic and something sweeter, maybe flowers. My head ached. My ribs felt like they'd been wrapped in fire, but I could hear steady breathing nearby. I turned my head slow and careful. Evelyn sat by the window, her hands clasped around a paper cup of coffee, eyes fixed on the world outside. When she noticed I was awake, she smiled gently, that calm, motherly kind of smile that didn't ask for anything. Hey there, she said softly. Welcome back. My throat was dry. My voice cracked. How long? 2 days, she said. You had a concussion. 3 cracked ribs, a fractured wrist. You're lucky to be alive. I let out a small laugh, hollow and tired. Luck isn't something I've had much of lately. You've got it now, she said simply, and handed me a glass of water. The detective will be here soon. He's been waiting for you to wake up. A knock came at the door. A tall man entered Detective Aaron Miles, mid-40s, calm eyes, the kind of presence that filled the space without pressing down on it. He showed me his badge, then sat at the edge of the chair Evelyn vacated. Ms. Weston, he began, voice measured steady. First, I want you to know you're safe. We've arrested your sister. My heart stuttered. And my mother? He hesitated, studying my face. She's being questioned. There's evidence of obstruction. She tried to interfere with the 911 call, and she instructed your sister to destroy the phone. I looked away, swallowing hard. She always knew how to make things disappear. He placed a small digital recorder on the bedside table. We found backups of your recordings on a cloud account linked to your work email. They're admissible. The timestamps line up with your hospital visits and prior police calls that were canceled. It's enough to press charges. The relief hit me like a wave and left me shaking. For the first time, someone believed me because they could hear it. I didn't think anyone would ever listen, I whispered. Aaron nodded. You'd be surprised how often silence hides the worst crimes. But you did the right thing. You gave the truth a voice. He turned off the recorder, leaning forward. Clara, I need to prepare you. This won't be easy. They'll deny everything. Your mother's already painting herself as the caretaker caught in the middle. But the recordings, the medical reports, your neighbor's statement, they all point to a clear pattern of abuse. She'll lie, I said quietly. She always does. Then let her, he said. The truth doesn't need her permission. Evelyn stepped closer, resting a gentle hand on my arm. You're not alone in this, honey. I'll testify if I have to. I heard the screams that night. The world needs to know. I felt something swell in my chest, something like courage, something like oxygen after years of choking on fear. Days passed. Each morning, the nurses checked my vitals, and each afternoon, Aaron returned with updates. Melissa had confessed to losing control, blaming stress grief, anything but choice. Mom maintained it was a family misunderstanding, but the walls were closing in on them. The recordings, the bruises, the lies, they didn't align anymore. One morning, Aaron came in with a folder. He placed it gently on my lap. This is your statement, he said. You can read it before signing, but I think you'll find it accurate. I flipped through the pages, medical photos, transcriptions of audio clips, time logs. Every cruel word, every denial, every broken thing I'd tried to hide was there in black and white. I reached the final page. It ended with one simple line. The victim requests full prosecution. I looked up at him. I'm not a victim, I said, voice shaking but clear. Not anymore. He smiled faintly. Then sign it as a survivor. My hand trembled as I wrote my name. It felt like reclaiming something I'd lost, my voice, my truth, my right to be believed. That night I watched the news on the small hospital TV. Local woman arrested in domestic violence case, the anchor said. They showed footage of my house, the flashing lights, the police tape, the same front porch where my family used to gather every Sunday. Now it was a crime scene. I turned off the TV and lay back, exhaling slowly. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. The silence that used to trap me was gone, replaced by something louder, stronger. Justice had found its way in, and this time I wasn't the one bleeding for it. The first few nights after being discharged felt unreal, as if the hospital walls had followed me home. Except now, home was Evelyn's guest room, a space that smelled of chamomile and lemon oil, not bleach and secrets. She'd set out fresh sheets and left a note on the nightstand. You're safe here. No one can reach you now. I read that line a dozen times before I believed it. Sleep was fragile. Sometimes I'd wake up drenched in sweat, the echo of Melissa's voice still sharp in my ears. Sometimes it was Mom's flat, disappointed, the sound of control masquerading as concern. Evelyn taught me grounding exercises. 5 things you see 4. You can touch 3. You hear. And little by little my breathing slowed when the nightmares came. In the mornings, I sat on her porch sipping tea as the neighborhood stirred to life. The sunrise over the maple trees was the same one that had hung over our house for decades, but for the first time I noticed its gentleness instead of its indifference. Healing wasn't pretty. It was awkward, uneven, and exhausting. I still jumped at sudden noises. I still flinched when someone raised a hand too quickly, but I was learning to live in my own skin again. Detective Miles visited once a week. He never stayed long, never pushed. He just asked if I needed anything, updated me on the case, and left his card on the counter just in case. One afternoon, he told me the court date was set. Melissa's facing aggravated assault. "Your mother's charged with obstruction," he said. "The DA's confident. You've given them everything they need." I nodded, trying to smile. "I don't know if I can face them." "You already did," he said. "The rest is just paperwork." After he left, Evelyn joined me at the table. "He's right," she said, slicing apples for pie. "You faced them every day you stayed alive in that house." She handed me a slice. "Now you get to live for you." Weeks passed, the bruises faded, and I began therapy through a local support center. My therapist, Mariah, was calm and patient, never rushing me. "Survivors often struggle with guilt," she said during our first session. "But guilt belongs to the ones who caused harm, not the ones who endured it." I thought about that sentence for days. For years, I'd carried the belief that if I had just been quieter, calmer, better, none of it would have happened. Now I was starting to see that my survival had nothing to do with being good. It had to do with refusing to disappear. Mariah asked me once what I missed most. I said, "The sound of peace." She smiled. "Then let's rebuild it." At night, I started writing again. Not the polished kind of writing I used to do for my students, just raw, messy words spilling onto paper. Letters I'd never send, confessions I'd never speak aloud. Sometimes I'd write to Dad, "You'd hate what this house became." Other times to Melissa, "I wish I could hate you without remembering who we were before." But the hardest letters were to Mom. "You taught me to stay silent. I hope you're learning what silence costs." I never reread them. I didn't need to. The act of writing was enough. One morning, Evelyn came into the kitchen holding her tablet. "You've gone viral," she said with a teasing grin. I frowned. "What?" She turned the screen toward me. A news outlet had published a follow-up about the case. The headline read, "Ohio Woman's Secret Recordings Expose Years of Hidden Domestic Abuse." Beneath it was a photo of our old house, boarded windows, and police tape fluttering in the wind. "They're calling you brave," Evelyn said. "I don't feel brave," I murmured. She shrugged. "Bravery isn't a feeling. It's a decision you keep making." That night, as I lay in bed, the cicadas hummed outside, steady and soft. For the first time in months, I didn't hear the echo of violence in my dreams. I heard my own heartbeat, and it didn't sound afraid. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and old paper, a place where truth and lies sat side by side, waiting to be weighed. I stood in the hallway outside courtroom 3B, clutching the edges of my statement so tightly the paper wrinkled under my fingers. The sound of heels clicking down the marble floors mixed with the low hum of voices, lawyers murmuring, strategy witnesses whispering prayers. My knees felt weak, but I wasn't the woman who'd crawled across the kitchen floor anymore. I had walked into this building by choice. Detective Miles found me by the water fountain. "You ready?" he asked, handing me a small bottle. His voice was steady grounding. I took it and nodded. "As I'll ever be." Inside the courtroom was colder than I expected. Melissa sat at the defense table in a gray suit that didn't fit her hair pulled back too tight, eyes darting between me and the jury. She looked smaller, deflated, like the walls of arrogance that had always protected her had finally caved in. Mom sat behind her, her pearl necklace perfectly centered the picture of restraint. She didn't meet my eyes. Maybe she couldn't. Maybe she still thought this was about embarrassment, not survival. The judge entered. Everyone rose and the trial began. The prosecutor, a woman named Denise Carter, laid out the case with surgical precision. For years, Ms. Weston endured repeated assaults by her sister, while their mother actively concealed the abuse. She said, her voice strong but steady. "This is not a family dispute. This is a pattern of violence, manipulation, and silence." She played one of the recordings. The sound filled the room, the slap, the scream, the crash of something breaking. Melissa's voice came through next, vicious and unmistakable. "You think you're better than me? Sign the papers." The jurors' faces shifted, some flinching, some tightening their jaws. Melissa looked down, jaw clenched. Mom's expression didn't move, but her knuckles whitened around the hem of her skirt. When my turn came, the bailiff called my name. I walked to the stand, swore to tell the truth, and sat. My pulse roared in my ears. The prosecutor approached gently. "Clara, can you tell the court what happened that night?" I took a breath, the kind Evelyn had taught me, in for 4, out for 6. Then I spoke. It wasn't just one night, I said. It was years of nights. I told them about the bruises, the excuses, the way Mom had called me dramatic whenever I tried to speak. I told them about the house that had become a stage where my pain was rehearsed and rewritten until even I questioned if it was real. When I described the moment Melissa found the recordings, the courtroom was silent. "She hit me until I couldn't see," I said softly. "And when I begged Mom to stop her, she said I was provoking her. That's when I realized they needed me hurt. It kept them together." Denise nodded. "And why did you record them?" "Because I knew no one would believe me otherwise," I said. My mother always told me that family stays silent, but silence almost killed me. When I finished, I glanced toward Mom. Her eyes glistened for the first time, but I couldn't tell if it was guilt or rage. Maybe both. The defense attorney tried to twist my words, suggesting the fights were mutual, that I had exaggerated, but the evidence was relentless. The medical reports, the police photos, Evelyn's testimony describing the screams, the digital timestamps from the recordings that matched every hospital visit. Truth laid bare in chronological order. When Melissa took the stand, her mask cracked. She tried to cry, to paint herself as the broken daughter, but the jury wasn't blind. Her temper slipped through. "She always thought she was better," she shouted. "She made me crazy." The judge's gavel hit the bench. "Order," he barked, but the damage was done. No one needed convincing anymore. The verdict came after 3 hours of deliberation. The courtroom buzzed when the foreperson stood. "We find the defendant Melissa Weston guilty on all charges." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The judge's voice was firm. "Sentenced to 8 years in state custody." I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I just sat there breathing. 8 years. It wouldn't give me back the time she took, but it gave me something else, proof that justice could be louder than silence. Then the second verdict came. Mom's. Margaret Weston guilty of obstruction of justice. 18 months probation and mandatory counseling. She turned toward me finally. Her lips trembled, eyes full of something that almost looked like regret. "Clara," she whispered as deputies guided Melissa away. "We're still family." I stood slowly. "No," I said, "we're evidence." Gasps filled the room. The gavel struck again. When I walked out of the courthouse into the bright Ohio sun, reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, but I kept moving. The air was crisp, the sky clear, a rare blue that felt like forgiveness. Evelyn was waiting by her car, smiling through tears. "You did it," she said. I shook my head. "No, we did." As we drove away, the courthouse shrinking behind us, I looked at my reflection in the window. For the first time in years, I recognized her, the woman who survived, not because she was lucky, but because she stopped staying quiet. And though the scars still ached beneath my sleeves, I realized something profound. Justice doesn't erase the pain. It just proves you weren't wrong to feel it. The morning after the verdict, I woke to sunlight spilling through the curtains of my new apartment. It was small, just a single bedroom with creaking floors and a kitchen that hummed when the refrigerator ran, but it was mine. No one else's footsteps haunted these walls. No one raised their voice. The silence here didn't suffocate. It soothed. I stood by the window, a mug of coffee warming my hands, and watched the city stretch awake below. For months, I had dreamed of this quiet moment. I'd imagined it would feel like victory, like some grand cinematic ending. But it didn't. It felt ordinary, and that was the miracle. Ordinary was something I'd never had before. The first week, I filled the space with small comforts, second-hand furniture, potted plants, and the faint sound of jazz humming from the radio. I hung no family photos. The only picture on my wall was of a wide field at sunrise, a place where everything was possible again. Evelyn visited, often always bringing something: homemade blueberry muffins, lemon cake soup in glass jars. "You're too thin," she'd say every time, but her smile carried pride instead of pity. "You look stronger, though." She was right. I was stronger. Not in the way people imagine when they say you're so brave. Strength wasn't armor, it was allowing myself to be soft without fear. Some nights I still woke from dreams of shouting my heart racing, but instead of curling up and shrinking, I would turn on the lamp, open my notebook, and write until the fear had somewhere else to live. I wrote about survival, about silence, about the way people will choose comfort over truth every time if you let them. I wrote about Melissa not as a monster, but as a warning of what happens when pain turns into envy. And about my mother, how generations of women before her had learned to protect appearances over children. One night, I wrote a line that stayed with me. Healing isn't forgetting, it's remembering without bleeding. A few weeks later, Detective Miles stopped by to deliver a final copy of the court transcript. Officially closed, he said with a small smile, "You did something good, Clara. A lot of women will see your case and know they're not alone." After he left, I sat at my desk reading the transcript, tracing the words with my fingertips. For years, I'd begged someone to believe me. Now the truth existed in ink bound and permanent. No one could rewrite it again. Outside, the evening sky deepened to violet. I lit a candle and stood by the window, whispering a quiet thank you to Evelyn, to the nurse who gave me that card, to the version of myself who dared to hit record. For the first time, I didn't feel like a ghost in my own story. I was alive, fully and fiercely, and the quiet that filled the room wasn't empty anymore, it was mine. It's strange telling this story out loud. For so long, my voice only existed in whispers and recordings and courtroom testimony and fragments of truth that felt too fragile to hold. But today, I tell it not for pity or closure. I tell it because silence is a disease, and I refuse to let it spread through me anymore. People still ask if I forgive them, my mother, my sister. I've thought about that a lot. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't freedom. It's another kind of chain. It asks the wounded to do the work of peace while the guilty sleep soundly. No, I don't forgive them, but I've stopped carrying them, and that's something better. Sometimes I walk past the courthouse on my way to work. It's not far from the small elementary school where I teach again. The children don't know my story. To them, I'm just Ms. Weston, the teacher who brings in homemade cookies and reads aloud with funny voices. But every time one of them flinches at a raised tone or apologizes for taking up space, I kneel down and tell them, you have nothing to be sorry for. I see myself in their eyes, the girl who thought silence was safety, and I make sure they never confuse the two. Last month, I started volunteering with a shelter for domestic abuse survivors. The first night, I sat in a circle of women, each one carrying her own invisible scars. When it was my turn to speak, I said, "They told me to stay quiet for the sake of family. But silence protects the guilty, not the wounded." A few women cried. One reached over and took my hand. "How did you start again?" she asked. I smiled by telling the truth out loud. At home that night, I wrote those words on a piece of paper and taped them to my mirror. Every morning, I read them before I leave the apartment. They remind me that healing isn't a straight line. It's a series of small, stubborn choices to get up, to speak to love. If you're listening to this, if you've ever been told your pain was an exaggeration or your voice was too loud, please hear me. You are not crazy. You are not alone, and your truth is not too heavy for the world to carry. I end my story the same way I begin my days now, with breath. Inhale for everything I survived. Exhale for everything I let go. And then, in the quiet that follows, I whisper what I wish someone had told me years ago. Breathe gently tonight. You are safe here.